Well, I would say thank you for having me, but if my dad's the pastor, you kind of don't have any choice. About 5 years ago, my wife and I lived in Roanoke, Virginia, out in the mountains, and our pastor was named Jeff. And Jeff was kind of a deep thinker, but he was also a hunter. He liked crossbow hunting, and he liked gardening. And one day we were talking about, being useful and handy, and then it, turned to the apocalypse. And he was, he was mostly tongue-in-cheek, but he was talking about how he's got a bug-out bag, and so, if anything goes sideways, he can get out of town. And he said, and if it does, I'm taking my bug-out bag, and then a select few from the church are going and forming a forest community, with the useful people who could be useful in case of the apocalypse. And so he said, well, Kelsey, your wife, she can come because she's a surgeon. Well, what can you do? And I said, leather crafting? And he's like, it's not enough. And so I think that day maybe subconsciously started this desire in me to learn how to frame a house, and so that I could, have something to offer to the forest community one day. Well, if the apocalypse happens, you're not getting, lumber from Home Depot, so you got to learn timber framing, which is where you cut down trees and turn them into giant timbers, and then you put them all together, no nails and everything. So I've been wanting to do that for years. And just recently, I actually got the chance to do that. And of course, Jeff was very much in the back of my mind. And I started it was a week-long course, and they said in 1 week, they'll teach you how to frame a house, which I thought was pretty ambitious, but there we were. And so I started that week as a novice. I knew I was a novice. I grew up in the trades, and so I worked for my dad, I worked for a lot of other people. I've done some roofing, I've done a little bit of framing, I've done painting and concrete work and, all of that stuff. But I've never done this, and so I knew that I was a novice, and I also knew that it was really dangerous because you're working with these giant chisels and slicks, and before we got into any of the chisel work, which was the vast majority of the week, there was basically sawing and chiseling. So before we got into the chisel work, they spent a whole day just teaching us how to sharpen the chisels. And the goal was, when you got done sharpening and stropping the chisel, you could shave hair off your arm. And so you've got about this number of people in a room about this size with giant chisels, which are about like this, and then the slicks are like this, and, big wide blades on the end, and they're moving and, hopping over the top of timbers, and so they were really pressing on us that, one false move, you're just carrying your chisel down here, and you'll slice your calf open. And then, of course, we've got these big Japanese saws, and then we're working with timbers that if you one false move with that, and you'll crush somebody's arm or foot or whatever. And so no one was really in the mood to be a hero. We were all just sort of learning as novices, and so. At no time did that become more apparent was when we got out of the workshop and into the classroom. I actually had some comfort there. Got into the classroom, and they were going to try to teach us engineering math. And I was homeschooled by two very smart people, one of them is here, who love words and language and songs and poetry and books and things like that, and have no special skill in math. They are talented in many other ways. And so I'm sitting there, and of course around me there's people with calculators And, the guys on the board, making marks and, and then we do this, and then the answer, anybody, and there would be, 5 or 6 people who they're just tracking right along. And I don't know up from down. And so I texted, I took pictures of what we were looking at and texted it to a friend who's a math teacher and said, what level of math would I need to actually understand what they're talking about here? And he texts back and says, calculus. And I'm like, well, I think I stopped with simple geometry and, haven't done anything since then. So I'm just trying to, copy down whatever he puts on the board, but it was 2.5 painful hours of, just realizing how ignorant I am of what they're doing. And so there was that. There was also an experience where I'm trying to lay out what's called a bird's mouth. And so in the rafters that go up, they come down and sit on a sill plate. What are they called? I forget. Whatever the outside beam is that runs along the edge of the building and the rafters are, what's that?
Top plate.
Top plate. Thank you. Yeah. See, I'm still learning. So you're basically trying to make the rafters coming down, and you're trying to make it kind of looks like a bird's mouth. And there's a particular orientation of the beam because they've already cut the tops of the rafters where they join together. And so I know that I always have trouble inverting things. When I try to put them into 3 dimensions, I invert them. And so I'm like, I know that I do this, so I'm going to double check and I'm going to look at it and, look at measure twice and cut once and, do everything and lay it all out. And I've got my framing square and I put it on 12 degrees because it's a 12-12 roof pitch. And I get it all done and it is perfect. And I come back and one of the guys who's there, who's one of the instructors, is erasing all my lines and converting it back because I did exactly what I always do, which is to reverse it. And so I'm there while he's, and there's like 3 or 4 other people gathered around. Well, I see this one's been inverted, so we're going to have to fix that. And, yeah. And so this whole week, realizing how much of a novice you are, you're just relying on the other instructors, but you're also relying on the other students because you're missing half of what's going on. And so you're just always they're checking with you and you're checking with them, and you're just learning in this kind of free, open environment. And your attitude is just hey, I realize I don't know, so please teach me. And the thing about that is that it's real easy to do when you recognize that this is an area where you're weak or where you're ignorant. But where it's really hard is when it's some area where it is a strength or you think it's a strength. Then having that kind of free, open, teach me, just learning, realizing, I've got to rely on others, I need to be open-minded, that becomes a lot harder. So for our scripture today, we're in Matthew 18, verses 1 through 5. All right. Matthew 18, 1 through 5. Just give everyone a moment. All right. Verse 1. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus, saying, "Who then is greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" Then Jesus called a little child to him, set him in the middle of them, and said, "Assuredly I say to you, unless you are converted and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever receives one little child like this in my name receives me. In other translations, it says, truly I say to you, unless you are changed, or unless you change. So it almost puts it more on you. Unless you change and become like little children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. And so, we've all experienced that person who just can't be taught. And so they think they know everything. I was that person when I was a child because I thought I knew better than my parents about everything. And in many ways, frankly, I did. So, it just is what it is. I remember one time being sent by my mother to go and pray because I had done something wrong. And so instead I went and prayed that the Lord would have mercy on my parents for being so cruel and misunderstanding how right I was. So not all of their discipline really worked that well. But anyway, the thing was, in that week that we were together, just wide open, just like that, look, I'm ignorant, I'm a novice, please teach me. Hey, did you catch what he said? Did you catch what he said? Or is this the right way we're supposed to be doing this? In that environment, we were there 5 days. And in 5 days, I left knowing I could go frame a house tomorrow. And to me, that was pretty impressive because we were using unconventional methods. It was all brand new. So we basically went from 0 to proficient, not experts, but proficient in 5 days. So your mentality makes a big difference. So, but what was really interesting was what happened on the last day, because that mentality kind of carried over for me in this unusual way, and I got to enter the kingdom a little bit more. And so it was the very last day, and there was this one guy who was in the student group, and he was just a real strange guy. And had a lot of opinions that, I didn't really agree with. But he was just kind of a strange guy. And, very, and I don't want to offend anybody, but he was very hippie, crunchy type guy. Carried his tools in a woven basket on his back with straps like a backpack. So you could make a case that he was a basket case, but he was just a strange guy and kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But usually when that happens, the Lord is, going to use that person to bless you in some way. And so I just kind of kept my eyes open, kept my ears open, and kept my eye on this guy. And so, come to find out, he works at the local land trust, where there's these preserved pieces of land, and there's trails on it. And he tells me and a couple of others, if you get a chance, there's this trail on our land preserve, and it's just, you really ought to go see it. And so I to be polite, I said, sure, maybe I will. So it's the last day, and then he asks me for a ride. And so I give him a ride to wherever he's going, and maybe he mentioned it again. And so I did not want to go walk on a trail. And especially because it was like 25 degrees outside, and it had just snowed, this is in Maine, and so it had snowed, it's real humid, and so it's kind of that cold that really sticks to your bones. And so I didn't really want to go walk on a trail, and did not intend to. But I think kind of the openness of just like, whatever, sure, let me have an experience. I was on my way to go back to my room and just kind of close out the day, but then I just turned around and went to the trail because this guy wanted me to. And so I get there, and I get out and it's freezing cold, and I just start walking. And I probably walked an hour and a half, I guess. But as I'm walking on this trail, God just starts speaking to me and just starts moving on my heart. And I start to realize, oh, I was supposed to come here because God has something to say to me. And so I'm really glad that I listened to this guy and was just kind of open, and I humbled myself, even though he was a total weirdo in a basket case. And, no, he's a nice guy. But as I'm walking, so this is the part where it was kind of that enter the kingdom moment for me. And I'm walking, and I look down, and it's a particular kind of snow. And, you know, there's slushy snow, and there's the snow that's more like pellets and everything. This was that beautiful, perfect, crystalline snow. And the sun was coming through the trees from over by this river that's got ice flows moving through it. And the sun comes down and shines on this crystalline snow, and all the snowflakes work as a prism. And they split the light, and on each snowflake, it's like you can see, as you move, the colors are changing like little tiny rainbows in the snow. And I just stopped, dead in my tracks, and this insane person dressed in jogging gear ran past me and off into a life of bitterness and torment, I assume, because only an absolute lunatic would be out running in 8 inches of snow in 25 degrees. But after that happened, and I was able to reflect in peace, it was, you just look around and you feel like I'm walking on diamonds. Like it was incredible. And it was just this moment where the beauty of God's kingdom broke through into my life, and the Lord spoke to me, and he said, this is the beauty of winter. What do you think the beauty will be of the spring? And the last several years, for me and Kelsey, have definitely been a winter season, and just a lot of struggles, and so it was this moment where I realized, wow, like it is going to change. It's going to end, but it's going to become something so much greater. And so the only reason that I was there was because I was willing to humble myself like a little child and listen to this guy who was super weird and go out and put on my snow boots and just kind of trudge through the woods, kind of the way that a kid would do. And so the reason why this is so important is because most of the time we don't know what we don't know, right? So there's that grid, you've got 4 quarters, and you've got the people who know and they know, and the people who know but they don't really know that they know, and the people who don't know but they think they know, and then the people who don't know and they know they don't know. The bottom one over here is the one you want to be in, unless you're the one who knows and you know. And so most of the time, when there's a gap in our knowledge or our experience or our life with God, we don't really know what that is. And so we kind of get stuck in our adulthood. So when you're a kid, sometimes it's just who you are. Sometimes it's that you're just put there by everybody else. You are the learner. You are always the learner. You are the one who doesn't know. And, no, we're not going to put that tool in your hands until you've mastered it and whatever. you're always kept in that position. But then you get older and you're an adult, and now it's like, here's what I like, here's what I think, here's where I go, and you kind of have your system, and then that's it. Like I know what I know, and I've learned what I want to learn, and that's, here's where I am. Okay, so that was real easy for me when we were doing that timber framing course, because I went in knowing I'm ignorant about this. Okay, but out in the woods on that trail, an hour and a half hike, through the snow and freezing cold, I didn't know that there was something out there for me. I didn't know that I didn't know that thing. Okay, and the way that I got there was through that childlike openness. Is you just coming again and again, each new day, saying, teach me, God. I don't know what I don't know. Just teach it to me. And all the stuff that I do know, which is great, just teach that all to me one more time. Okay, let's refresh it. And through that position, which you have to choose, remember, in childhood, it's chosen for you. Now we're adults. And the only way we get there is if we choose it for ourselves. And so as we choose that place, that's the place that God can reveal himself and shape us as he desires to, and bring us into the kingdom. So let's pray.